Okay, so Shankara is arguing that the self and God and Brahman are exactly the same thing. And if we go over to the other side a little bit, we've got Madhvacharya. And in the iconography of Madhvacharya, Shankar Acharya he lived 32 years, usually put in the 8th century, 700s AD. Madhvacharya, I think, lived in the 12th century, in the 1100s AD. When he's shown, represented, I don't know if we've got any pictures of Madhvacharya, there's probably one somewhere around. He's usually shown as being with 2 fingers raised like that. He's holding up the 2 fingers, and not for victory sign or anything else, but it's the 2 things, because God and the living being are absolutely different. There is no sense of unity between God and the Atman, between the soul and God. So it's completely different. Shankaracharya is saying there is only one. The soul is God. Madhvacharya is saying the soul can never be God. It is something completely different. Absolutely different theology. And then we've got Ramanujacharya, Gita commentary here. Madhvacharya's commentary on the Gita is very difficult to get hold of. We have it, but we had to send someone over to the Bodleian Library and photocopy it, because it's out of print now. Been out of print for 100 years for some reason, but if you want to read it, it is possible to get hold of a copy. Ramanuj, anyway, is between the 2. What he's saying is that, and perhaps I've gone too far in this, but he's saying that there is partial unity between God and the self, as there is partial unity between the part and the whole. Okay, let's go back again and look at these positions in a little more detail. And first of all, let's take the Buddhists. We'll have them off the table because they're Nastikas, they're not Vedantists. But the Buddhist position is that nothing, I have to be careful here because it's difficult to encapsulate it properly in words, but their position is Shunyavad, which is the doctrine of void or the doctrine of emptiness. The Buddhist position is there is nothing that is permanently real. That's why they talk about shunya, because at every moment what was present a microsecond ago is now gone. There's nothing that is real, unchangeable and constant. There's just an unending state of flux. I remember seeing that film Siddhartha with Shashi Kapoor. Have you seen that? Yeah. But the old fella, the old Buddhist Govinda, shows Siddhartha the river and says, "Observe the river, Siddhartha." Is it Siddhartha? Anyway, Shashi Kapoor. Observe the river. It never stops. There is no moment we can say this is river, because the minute we say this is river, then it's gone. Everything's a state of flux. Therefore, Shunyavad. Now, Shankar Acharya, by his opponents, is sometimes accused of being a sort of Buddhist, but he's not. He's absolutely different from the Buddhists, because Shankaracharya says there is something that is real, there's only one thing that is real, and everything is that reality. And he's not making this up himself. He's got this from the Upanishads. The Upanishads say Sarvam Kalu Idam Brahma. All of this is just Brahman. So it's there in the Upanishads. It says the same again. I am Atma Brahman. Yourself is God. So what Shankara is saying is there is only one reality. And when we perceive diversity in the world, that's illusion. We're making a mistake. So we're seeing something that is real, but we're not seeing it as it really is. It's really there, but we're misidentifying it. So I'm looking here and I'm seeing individuals. I'm saying you, and I'm saying, I know, names, faces, etc. But I'm making a mistake, ultimately. What I should be saying is, I'm just Brahman. All of it is Brahman. The variety is an illusion. Now, that sounds a little bit difficult to accept, and Shankara's thought is far more subtle than probably I'm representing it, because he's not actually saying that the variety we perceive when I'm going to shake hands and say, how are you? That's not just a complete, I don't know, a sort of false world, a dream world that I exist in. But what he's saying is it's a contingent reality. There are levels of reality and levels of realness. So this is real, but it's not absolutely real. It's somewhat real. And what we have to do is go through the somewhat reality to attain the absolute reality. And the absolute reality is the understanding that I myself am God. So you can see there the implications in terms of practice, which we'll talk about another time. But in a sense, for Shankar Acharya, and indeed for the Upanishads, Yajnavalkya in the Brihadaranyaka makes the same point. What's the point of worshipping God? There's no one to worship. God ultimately is your own self. So when you're bowing down and doing the praise and the puja, you've got a vision of a God out there. He's in his heaven or he's in his temple, but he's something else. But for the Advaita, there is nothing else. There is only your own self. You shouldn't be looking out there. You should be looking in. But interestingly, Shankar Acharya is not going around knocking temples down and saying, let's get rid of all this puja, stop this puja, it's all wrong. In fact, just the opposite. He's saying, let's do it more, because he accepts that whilst one is on the level of the partial contingent reality, the notion of God has validity, and God exists on that level of reality, but he's just not the ultimate reality. It's a subtle system of thought. I hope that makes some sort of sense. But the fundamental to understand is that Shankara's definition of God, his understanding of Vedanta, is based on you yourself are non-different from God. There is no distinction from yourself and the deity. Thank you. And moksha, liberation from rebirth, which again is the goal of Vedanta, is the goal of Shankara, is obtained only by knowledge. Jnana is the only path to moksha, and Shankara is absolutely insistent upon that, which is why he has this massive argument with Mandana Mishra, because Mandana's going on about rituals, do this, do that, do it, and Shankara's saying rituals are okay, they might purify you, but you won't get the ultimate goal from ritual. The ultimate goal comes not from what you do, but from your consciousness, your realization. The moment you realize the identity of the self with Brahman, then moksha occurs. It's nothing to do with the rituals you've performed. You can't do a sort of tally up. I've now done 25 million Agnihoma yagyas, therefore I'm going to be liberated. It's that point at which you realize the identity of the self with Brahman. And I would even go as far as to say that you might characterize Shankara's Advaita as non-theistic, because the notion of Brahman as the absolute single reality isn't really identical with God. It's not the God in the Western sense that we understand as an all-powerful, omnipotent being on high. God is more of a philosophical concept which is identical with the absolute reality. Okay, let's move on quickly and let's go to Madhva, because he's the natural contrast to Shankara. We've got the Buddhists way over there by the bookshelf. We've got Shankara here on this end of the table, and we've got Madhva here, because Madhva's saying something different. And again, bear in mind, they're reading exactly the same texts, and this is the two utterly different meanings they're deriving from Upanishads, Gita, etc. Madhva says there is a God, and his name is Vishnu, and he looks like this. He has a four-armed form, and he is absolutely different from the self. Your Atma is never God. And he makes really quite a logical point, is you're a bit stupid. Nothing personal, but we're all a bit stupid. We're all limited. We're all subject to birth and death. We're all subject to illusion. Therefore, how can you possibly claim to be identical with this supreme, absolute, omniscient, all-powerful deity? No, it's not true. It's Dvaita. Shankara is Advaita. Madhva is Dvaita. Two, the soul is one thing, God is another, and if you like, ne'er the twain shall meet. And therefore, in Madhva's Vaishnava system, the idea is that you don't become God, you worship God. You bow down before him, and you engage in acts of puja and loving devotion to him. So completely different there. And we could explore Madhva's system in more detail.